Hi, everybody. My name's Lonnie, and this is my case study on Malcolm. Let's get started. The program we're looking at today is from the Red Room at the College of the Canyons ECE Center. I'm borrowing this information from ECE 104, Intro to Curriculum. Originally, I interviewed the center director at Learn Beyond the Book, but for continuity's sake, I'm using the information I already have about Malcolm's program. The children in the program are preschoolers ages 3 to 5. The teacher to child ratio in the Red Room is 1 to 8, and when the number of students meets or exceeds this ratio, an assistant teacher aids the master teacher. Due to current COVID-19 regulations, there can only be a maximum of 10 children in the room at one time. The Red Room is a child centered, play based lab school that encourages play as work and learning, meaning it's also partially based on the Montessori model. ECHRS, or the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale, is an assessment tool designed to measure the quality of group programs. This ECHRS highlight is from a virtual tour of a classroom. The criteria I chose was item 5, child-related display. That means that the children's work makes up at least half of the classroom display. In that video, children's work, both flat and 3D, are highlighted and take up more than 50% of the space. I didn't see the entire room and couldn't see three-dimensional work, but because of the amount of flat work in the classroom, I concluded that the 3D component is most likely met. CLASS stands for Classroom Assessment Scoring System. It's another assessment tool, but this tool measures the quality of interactions between teachers and students. Again, this information is from a video observation that is not part of Malcolm's program. The domain I focused on was emotional support. From there, I chose to highlight the positive climate dimension. The indicator I selected was positive communication. This means that the teacher demonstrates positive verbal and physical affection while they authentically praise children. The teacher also sets clear expectations. I concluded that this indicator was fully met. The teacher practiced positive communication both inside and outside, and her praise was specific and authentic. Now, let's talk about Malcolm. Malcolm is a 4-year-old boy in preschool. He has short blonde hair and appears to be about the same size as the other children in his class. Malcolm is about the same height as most of the other children, but it seems like he weighs less than some of his peers. He also has a dimple on his right cheek. You'll notice that in the picture, Malcolm is wearing a fabric mask. That's in accordance with the COVID-19 regulations. I noticed a few things about Malcolm throughout my observations. First, Malcolm picks up most things with his left hand, but writes with his right hand. Malcolm is very energetic, loud, and unable to focus on one thing for more than a few minutes at a time without being distracted or trying something else. Malcolm is also very independent. When he wants something, he knows how to get it and knows how to ask for help if he needs it. Here's the starting point. I'm going to share some baseline information about Malcolm's interests, social interactions, and development. Indoors, Malcolm demonstrated a significant interest in large manipulatives like Legos and toy cars. He also enjoys writing and spelling. Outdoors, Malcolm enjoys gross motor games that involve running, jumping, and climbing. He especially likes to create and play rules-based games. Malcolm seems most interested in solitary play, as he works alone with his manipulatives most of the time. When Malcolm is interested in playing with other children, he wants to play games with rules of his own design. I also noted that for the most part, Malcolm only seems to be interested in his peers' activities from a distance. He spends a lot of time distracted from his individual projects by looking at what other children are doing, but tends not to engage. Malcolm is highly active, easily distracted, very loud in his emotions, and is generally a happy child. He has a lot of excess energy and spends most of his outdoor time running, climbing, and jumping around on the jungle gym. Sometimes Malcolm shows patience and good manners, and other times he is brash and demanding. All of this is typical for your average 4-year-old. Malcolm has shown mastery in 3 different domains: gross motor, language, and socio-emotional. The gross motor skills he's most adept in are jumping, climbing, and so on. Regarding language, Malcolm speaks in expanded sentences and speaks clearly enough for strangers to understand. Malcolm shares toys with his peers and enjoys playing simple games with simple rules. These peer interactions show Malcolm's socio-emotional competency. Now we're going to look at a few snapshots that reflect the information I've shared so far. In this photo, Malcolm stares at the camera. This photo was taken after he expressed frustration at not being able to fit pieces of wooden track together. These blocks were the focus of his attention during this indoor play period. In this outdoor observation, Malcolm was told several times to slide on his bottom and to leave space for the other children. In this picture, Malcolm is listening to the teacher who tells him to wait while another student gets down before jumping. In this photo, Malcolm works with a classmate to spell her name. She helps him with some of the letters he can't remember and praises him when he finishes. In this photo, Malcolm is celebrating a victory in a child-directed game of tic-tac-toe. He pumps his fists and cheers himself on. Here, Malcolm works to open his saran-wrapped snack. It takes him about 30 seconds to do, and when he's successful, Malcolm balls up the plastic wrap and shoots it into the trash can, yelling, "Goal!" I'd like to take a moment to reflect on what I've observed before moving into our action plan. This reflection guided my choices about how to support Malcolm's growth. I'd like to know more about how Malcolm handles challenges. He became frustrated with the building blocks, but nobody came to help him. I wonder what he would have done if the snacks hadn't interrupted his time with the blocks. His frustration and lack of patience are unsurprising for children his age, but Malcolm's outbursts are louder and more frequent than the rest of the children in his class. Now we're going to get into Malcolm's progress report to review his development and form action plans for home and school. The developmental checklist is, like it sounds, a list of milestones and skills that the typical child of a certain age is achieving. The CDC is a great source of information for childhood milestones and has checklists from birth to 5 years old. I used a similar model. The domain I selected was the socio-emotional domain. In particular, the measure cooperates or plays with other children. While observing Malcolm, I saw his classmate, Sophie, ask him to write her name, and he eagerly agreed. He asked for help with letters he couldn't remember, and Sophie congratulated him after he was done. Using the same developmental checklist, I stayed within the socio-emotional domain as an area needing support. The measure I observed was lashes out without any self-control when angry or upset. While he didn't throw a fit, Malcolm was loud and visibly upset when his car tracks didn't fit together. He slammed his hand down on the pieces to try and force them together and cried out for help when he failed. To support Malcolm's developing socio-emotional skills, I plan to add letter beads to the manipulative section. The learning goal is twofold. First, threading the beads and practicing problem solving will encourage Malcolm to practice patience. Second, letter beads and string will help develop his dexterity. If COVID-19 presents a problem with sharing these materials, there are several other word creation and letter recognition games that Malcolm can safely play online. My at-home action plan is to make Malcolm the grocery list guru in his household. Here, the learning goal is to use what spelling and words Malcolm knows to oversee the writing and explaining of the grocery list. This activity is an easy way to encourage Malcolm to read and write at home. It also encourages Malcolm to be invested in what he eats, which can lead to him eating and enjoying new and nutritious foods. Now, the last thing we're going to do is take a look at Malcolm's learning story. The story is about Malcolm's child-directed tic-tac-toe game. Tic-tac-toe, here we go. Tic-tac-toe encourages development in several milestones. Playing with others helps Malcolm's socio-emotional development. Explaining game rules showcases his growth in language, and his drawing and redrawing of the game board uses Malcolm's spatial awareness skills. Malcolm played with chalk today. I saw him lay down and draw with long strokes. Some of the lines looked like letters. When his classmates came over, Malcolm thought of something they could do together, then said, I know what we can play. Malcolm drew a small square box with four other squares inside. Malcolm looked at it and then started a new box, which he quickly abandoned. He turned around and found a large space to draw and made a long rectangle and invited his friend to play what looked like tic-tac-toe. I saw Malcolm tell his friend twice that he wasn't following the game rules. At the end, I heard Malcolm say, I win 3 in a row, and saw him pump his fists in the air. Malcolm, today I watched you play tic-tac-toe with your friends. You looked so excited when you thought of a game you and your friends could play together. You saw the first box you drew was too small and drew a bigger one so you could both play. I also noticed that you told your friend that he wasn't playing the game correctly and reminded him of the rules. You celebrate your victories with so much excitement. Your reaction reminded me of an athlete who just won an important game. I wonder what kind of games you play at home with your family, and if they like to celebrate like you, too. Since you like drawing and playing games with chalk, I'll also show you some other games you can play with chalk, like hopscotch. You love jumping, drawing, and writing, and hopscotch has all those things. How exciting! Finally, to engage the family further and determine why some of his reactions are so intense, I'd like to ask them how Malcolm plays and behaves outside of school. Does he play competitive games at home? How are his emotional reactions? Are they similar to what I'm sharing now? These questions will continue to provide me feedback and ensure that I can create a developmentally sound learning space for him now and in the future. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time.